It's Connor again with my second update to my challenge that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. First of all, I'd like to apologise for my voice. I've got a bit of a sore throat at the moment, but I'm still determined that we're going to get through this today. Okay, so those who joined last week will know that we started building what we're now calling the Daily Digest newsletter service, which basically brings in articles from user-submitted articles, puts them into a SharePoint list, and then broadcasts them out over Power Apps via email and via Teams. Hi, Hugo. So we're going to be looking today... Excuse me. We're going to be looking today at the second part to what we started last week, and that's going to be the approval process of approving the articles as they come into the list. So we'll just quickly go back to Miro, which we demonstrated last week. We basically created the form over on the left and the SharePoint site on the right, and we was able to connect the two, SharePoint site and the form, together using Power Automate. So if you haven't seen that video yet, that live stream, it is available on the YouTube channel. There will be a link. I think I put it in the comment section, on the description section of this video, but I will post it afterwards if it's not there. But moving on, let's take a look at how our approval process is going to work. So over the last week, I've been looking at various videos and kind of learning material to see how approval process, how the approval workflow works. And I've tried out a few different solutions, and that was one, creating the approval process in SharePoint itself, and the second one was using Power Automate to approve the articles as they come in. After looking at both scenarios, it turns out that using both of them, like conjoined, works best. So I'm going to demonstrate and share with you how I ended up creating that in the end. So just looking at this here, this is the section that we're on now. So this is the first process, which comes from the SharePoint list. So when a SharePoint list item is created, let me just change that to this screen. That's the one we want. So just looking at this, we're going to start with this first process here. So when an item is created in the SharePoint list, it kicks off a approval workflow process, which will then be sent to one of the admins for approval. And we can do this using Teams as well. So if I quickly just jump back over to Teams, which is probably the easiest way I can get to my SharePoint site, the first thing that we need to do is go and open SharePoint. And over here we have our articles list, which we created last week. And at the moment, there isn't a column for the approval process, which we do actually need to include. So the way, thinking about this kind of from a top-down view, the way that I'm going to be doing this is having every item that gets submitted into the list require it to be approved before it's visible. Now, SharePoint has something built in which allows you to do this. And the easiest way to this is to go to the settings of your articles list, which for me is going to be under site contents. And then if you click on the three dots next to articles list here, and you can click on settings. And this will bring up the settings dashboard for my articles list. And to get to the approval process, you'll need to go to versioning settings. So there are two options. One you can use out of the box, SharePoint list approvals, Or 2, use Power Automate to do the approvals. Power Automate gives you way more flexibility because you can do extra actions as part of the approval, such as post a card into Teams. SharePoint list approach is more limited. Yep, that's right. So once we've kind of excuse me, once we've kind of looked at building this approval process, we will probably start looking into adaptive cards in Teams and other ways to actually approve articles as they come in. But for this live session, we're just going to look at going through the email process and also looking at how you can accept or approve articles using Teams and the approvals dashboard in Power Automate. So going back to where we were with SharePoint, if we look on the right here, we're in the versioning settings. Sorry, my cough's quite bad today. We look at the versioning settings, and on the right here, we have require content approval for submitted items. Default, this is set to no. So we need to change this to yes. And you'll notice that this becomes available at the bottom here, which is who should see the draft items in this list. And at the moment, we're just going to leave this as the default option, which is only users who can approve items. In other words, the admins. So if we click OK, not much has changed from what we can see here. However, if we go back to our SharePoint list now, so we go back to our articles list, we have a approval status column, which has now appeared. And I'm assuming because we already had these 3 items, that's why they're already approved. But what we want to happen is them to come in as pending and then use Power Automate to change that to approved once the approval process workflow has finished. So we have our column here now, and we can start looking back at our flow and making a few adjustments to basically change this. What I'm going to do to start with is I'm just going to add another article to this list as I want to see and check how that comes through, just to make sure that that comes through as pending. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to go to the usual place, which is the community site for Collab 365, and we'll go and find another blog post. We'll use Matt Weston's Automate My Life. So I'm just going to open this up and just make sure that we have enough content to use, which we do. So I'm going to go back to my form, which I created last week. Again, if you haven't followed along from last week, if you go watch last week's live stream, you'll be able to see how I created the form and how the original flow, which I'll show you in just a second, actually kicked off. So in here, I'm just going to fill out a new article with the, let's not do find, we don't need that. So we'll just put the title in, and we'll grab the URL. I'm not sure if this has a featured image URL, but we can get that by going back here. We'll just use copy image link from here. And just a quick off the bat, we can see that that's, we can use Power Automate as the category. And we will just grab the first line of text for the excerpt, or the first sentence, should I say, or paragraph. And if we submit, we can see that response was submitted. Now if we come into our articles list, yeah, so we now have our new article at the bottom here, and we can see that the approval status is showing as pending, which is what we want, because eventually we don't want to make the pending posts visible to everyone, because obviously they need to be approved, so any dodgy content that someone decides to try and post has to go through the approval process, which is why we're putting this in place. So, excuse me. So if we then head over to Power Automate, we can start working with this to try and basically make this change from pending to approved when the approval process completes. Just before I do that, it is possible to do this directly from this list view in SharePoint, and you can do this by clicking on the three dots on the right hand side of the title, go into more, and then go into approve/reject, and you can basically do your approval process through here. However, the reason we're gonna explore the actual Power Automate approval process is so we have more options and more ways to approve articles as they come in. You might not have access to SharePoint at the time, you might only have access to your email, in which case you'll be able to approve it through a email that gets sent to you. So we're going to leave this as pending for now, just so we can use this to test when we create our flow. So I'm just going to head over into Power Automate, and we are going to go to My Flows. At the moment I have two flows. I've got a test flow, which is what I've been spending my time on this week, trying out different methods. And then I'm going to be using the kind of live version, the non-test version, to share with you guys on a Friday, basically what I've been doing throughout the week. So you'll be able to see, you'll probably see throughout all of my screens, you'll see a test version of everything that we're creating, but we can just ignore that for now. So if I go into when an article is submitted in forms, and press edit. So at the moment, what this is doing is it is basically taking every response that comes in through Microsoft Forms and creating an item in the SharePoint list based on that. Now I tried a scenario. Excuse me. So I tried a scenario throughout the week where I create the approval process in between when the SharePoint item list item gets created and when it gets response details. And then it dawned on me that this is probably not an ideal approach, because thinking kind of more towards the bigger solution of what we're going to be building, it turns out that we're going to obviously have more ways of submitting articles into your SharePoint list. So say, for example, you were submitting through Teams and Microsoft Forms to submit an article. At the moment, we only have the Power Automate workflow process to create that item based on that form. So if I was to create the approval workflow process between that, it would only be valid for the point when the form is submitted. So we need to create a new a new flow in Power Automate, which will essentially kick off the workflow after the SharePoint item is created, rather than when the response comes in. And this way we can allow those pending articles to come into our SharePoint list. So if I just jump back into Power Automate, we actually don't want to edit this one. We're going to keep this one as it is. So the item gets created, and that's the kind of final output for the response from forms. So if I go over to create on the left, and again, we are going to create an automated cloud flow. And we'll give this a name. Now trying to think logically and being descriptive without writing too much. We will name this approval process when SharePoint list item is created. And for the flows trigger, we're going to basically kick off with what we ended with the previous one that we built with the forms trigger. So this is going to be the create item, and it's going to be in SharePoint. So when an item is created, and we can click create. So as with any SharePoint connector, it's going to ask for the site address. So we need to go ahead and find our site address. So again, we've got our daily digest and our daily digest test. That's a tongue twister, that. So we're going to use the daily digest, which is our live version, which I'm going to be sharing with you on the Fridays. And we're going to look for our list name, and that's going to be the articles list. So with that created, we now need to add our actions. I'm just going to have a quick look. Advanced options, we don't need anything there. So yeah, so I'm going to create a new step. And under the new step, we can do a simple search for approve or approvals. And we can see this at the top here. If we click this, it's going to show us a list of different ways that we can start and moderate our approval process. So the one that we are going to use is going to be the start and wait for an approval, which basically means that until the item is approved in our flow, the rest of the flow won't actually kick off. It will just freeze where it is until that gets approved. So if we click on the drop down for approval type, we get 4 different options. We have approve, reject, everyone must approve. We have approve, reject, first to respond. We have a bunch of custom responses, which is wait for all responses or wait for one response. We're going to leave the last 2, but I'm going to give you a quick explanation as to what the first 2 are. So the first one, everyone must approve, basically means that whenever the approval process is kicked off, everybody that is required, or any contacts that you put in the assigned to, which we'll get to in just a second, will need to respond approve for it to be able to be accepted and approved into our SharePoint list. Which that is a option that we could do. It might be an option that you choose to do when you create this. It all depends on the kind of policies that you want to create around this application and this solution. But for this one, we're going to use first to respond, and that's just going to allow the first person in our assigned to list to approve or reject our article. So we'll click approve/reject first to respond. Give that a second and it loads up. So we have a bunch of rows which we need to fill out now. The first one is going to be the title, and for this what I'm going to do is I will use some dynamic data. So I'm going to start off with a kind of little message which is going to kind of prompt the admin to know what to do. Please can you review this blog? And then what we can do is put in our dynamic content for the title, which is essentially the title that gets submitted in the form, which then becomes the title of the SharePoint list. So that will then say, please can you review this blog, with the title of the blog. Secondly, we need to add a assign to, and this is going to be who is responsible for approving or rejecting the blog post that comes through. For this, I'm just going to use myself, just for demonstration purposes. I mean, further down the line, I was looking into, and I put a post out on social media yesterday, actually, asking if there was a way to assign a kind of group of admins to save coming in here and changing it every time a new admin becomes an admin, or you have someone responsible for approving or rejecting posts. And the answer that came back to me was the easiest option would possibly be to create another SharePoint list with your list of admins, and then that way it's kind of more dynamic content that you can use elsewhere in case you need to. So yeah. So with the details, I mean, this can be anything really. I'm going to use the excerpt for the details tab, the detail section, sorry. And this is just going to give the first paragraph, as we entered before, into what they need to approve. So they might not necessarily have to go to the link itself, but we'll get onto that, which is right here, which is the item link, which we are going to add the blog post URL. And we can leave the item link description as it is at the moment. So that node will kick off, excuse me, a approval process, which will be sent to my email, which I can then go and approve things as they come in. If you just bear with me a second. I just need to check on one last thing before we continue. Okay, so moving on from this, my voice is really going today. But yeah, so moving on from this, we're going to need to create a kind of if statement. Now, the way I've kind of learnt a bit of code in my past, over the past year, so I'm a little bit familiar with the coding language. I know it's not called an if statement. In Power Automate, they're called conditions, and that's going to basically allow you to specify a set or amount of variables, which, if they match or if they are equal to whatever the second variable is, will give you an outcome. So we're going to do this by doing new step. And if we go to control here, we can see a list of controls, or the control connector, should I say. And for this one, we're going to use condition. And you can see it splits off into two different trees. We've got a if yes tree and an if no tree. And these trees get triggered by the value, whether it matches or doesn't match in the condition. And you can add more than one conditions, so it's kind of like saying if something is equal to something, do something, and then you can say if something is equal to something and something else is equal to something, then do something, which means that both of those have to be true for it to progress down the yes tree. So in the choose a value, we need to select what's called outcome, and this is going to these dynamic content sections here are being brought in from this start and wait from approval process. So we're going to select outcome. If we give that a second, and we are saying that if the outcome is equal to, and there's a bunch of different options. If it's like a number value, you can do it's greater than, it's less than. There's loads of different conditions which you can base your this kind of if statement around. I don't know why I keep calling it an if statement. I mean, technically it is, but yeah. So we're going to say that, excuse me, we're going to say that if our outcome is equal to approve, and it's got to be the word approve, not approved or approves, because it has to match basically what's in here. So if we look here, we can see this approve / reject. So if we go back down here, so if it's equal to approve, we want it to do something. We don't need to put a if statement for reject, because this will get triggered if basically this first outcome isn't true. So it's not a case of everything has to be true in here to go down the no tree. You don't need to do that. Only if you only need to basically, it's hard to explain. You only need to use the kind of true statement to go down the right tree. If it's false, then it will go down the other tree. I hope that made sense. But anyway, looking back at this again. So if the outcome here is equal to approve, we then need to do something. Now, what we need to do is going to be, if we head back over to our articles list, is change the approval status, which automatically comes in as pending when a new article is submitted, to approved. And if it's false, we'll change this to rejected as well. And that way we can still see a list of approved and rejected items in our list. We can then eventually, further down the line, create another flow which deletes any rejected posts or withstanding posts that have been sitting around for a period of time. So let's go back to flow, and we want to add an action under the if yes. So the action that we want to add is going to be part of SharePoint. So if we just do a search for SharePoint, and you can see there's a lot of actions available with SharePoint. Now I know this is quite near the bottom. Let's have a look. Set content approval status. So if we could just click on this here. Basically what this does is it sets the content approval status for an item in a list or library that has content approval turned on, which is what we turned on at the beginning of this live stream over in our SharePoint list. So that's exactly what we need. So if we click on this, again, as I said before, it's going to ask for your site address, which is going to be our daily digest. And it's going to ask for our library name, and this is going to be our articles list. So having these three options here, it is also possible to turn on approvals for your document libraries in SharePoint as well. But that is very much out the scope of what we're trying to build. So we're going to click on our articles list, and we are going to click on the ID, and this is going to be the ID of our SharePoint item. By default, my understanding is that when a SharePoint item is created, SharePoint automatically creates behind the scenes a ID for it, which is technically a separate column, which allows you to differentiate and identify the items in your SharePoint list. You could do this manually as well if you wanted maybe a bit more control over it. But for now, we will use the ID for our SharePoint list item. And under action, we have three options here as well. So we're just going to be looking at approve and reject for today. So the first one, we're going to select approve, because this is going to be that if the outcome is equal to approve, then we want to approve the item in the SharePoint list. And there's options to add comments or e-tags, which I've not looked into e-tags, so I wouldn't quiz me on those just yet. So that's all we need at the moment for the approval status, set content approval status in the yes column, the yes tree, sorry. And we need to do something for the no. So if something gets rejected, if we left it how it was now, then any items in here, when they get rejected, they wouldn't actually change. They'd just stay as pending. Yeah, we need to change that to rejected when somebody rejects a article. So using exactly the same methods, we can now know what we need to search for, which is C content approval status. Sorry, set content approval status. And we'll do exactly the same. We'll grab our daily digest. We'll select our articles list. We'll select the ID. And we'll change the action to reject. And that kind of completes our approval process for in Power Automate. So the next thing we need to do is we need to test this out to make sure it actually works. Now, at the moment, even though I submitted this article in here, I did this before I set up this approval process. So I'm not going to receive an email or any notifications or anywhere in my approvals dashboard to accept this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this for now, and I'm going to re-enter it. Now we have that in place. So what I can do is, if I quickly save this, and we can see that flow is ready to go. So we now need to submit a new article. So we're going to submit another response, and we'll just grab that same same information that we had before. Let's go grab the image URL, the category we'll set to Power Automate. And the excerpt, we'll just grab that first paragraph again. And we can click submit. So we can see that our response has been submitted again. And if we just give it a moment in our SharePoint list, that should appear. So that's now showing as pending. Now, there are a few different ways out of the box without any further kind of adjustment to our flow where we can approve or reject these articles as they come in. And the first one is going to be looking at our approvals dashboard, which is under action items approvals in Power Automate. Now, if I've done this correctly, it should appear here, which it is not. I have received something in Teams, so we'll just give it a second. In fact, we'll refresh the page. There we go. So yeah, we can see that we've got a new request that's come in. We can see that the requester was myself. It's got some details here. It tells me when it was received. So what I can do is I can click into this, and we can see a kind of quick look at what we need to approve. So we have our approval title here, which is, "Can you please review this blog?" It's got the title of the blog. We can see who the requester is, and we have a link which we put into Power Automate, which is the link that we grabbed from the blog post URL, which is a clickable link which should, if I've set this up correctly, take us to the right page. And there we go. So we can see before we approve this, we have access to the whole article as a whole. So we can see exactly what we need to approve. So as the approver, I can come in, I can scan through and go, yep, this looks great. We want to add this to our articles list, so we can actually share this. So if we then go back to Flow, scrolling down, we can see details, and you can see the excerpt that we have here. Oh, sorry. And right at the bottom is where we can choose our response. So at the moment we have approve, reject, or reassign. Now, if I remember correctly, there is a setting. Before I accept this, I will show you. If I go back to my flows and open up the one that we've just created, there is the possibility that you can reassign this to somebody else, and I am going to turn that off for this. It might be useful in your industry when you create this, because you'll technically be able to, say for example, your speciality in your kind of in your group was marketing, and someone was posting about the actual industrial side of something, and you're not sure if that has any relevance to your company or your staff. So you can turn that on, or leave that on if that's the case, and you'd like to assign this to somebody who has maybe a bit more know over certain blog posts. But for my case, I'm just going to show you how you can turn that off. So if we click back into the start and wait for approval, and then you click show advanced options, you'll see that we have enable reassignment, and I can change that to no in here. And again, you've got enable notifications, which is yes or no as well. With the requester forms, as long as you're logged into your Microsoft account, I think if my information I know I've looked at is correct, that the requester will automatically be generated from the logged in user. Whereas if they were, say, guests or not logged in, you could maybe create a separate field in your forms that maybe says email address, just so the person who's approving your article knows where to find you and knows how to contact you if they need to for any reason. But the reason I said that we could add that email address is we could then surface that email address as our requester in here, and it would come up as dynamic content with maybe a user email or whatever you've decided to name it as. But we'll leave that for now. So if we just quickly go back to our approvals window, let me just save that first. If we go back to our approvals window, we can see that this approval is still needing approval. So I'll show you another way, if you just bear with me. I just need to make sure that I'm not showing anything that I shouldn't be, which is fine. They are okay, I think. So yeah, if I just quickly go to Teams, under Teams, I have received a notification under the activity feed, and if I click on this, you can see a bunch that I've been testing with earlier throughout the week. You can see my amazing, thoughtful names which I've been using. But we can see right at the top here that we have a new approval, which is basically exactly the way it is displayed in the approvals dashboard, but a much easier way for admins to kind of go about their day-to-day activities in Teams and be able to quickly approve or reject posts that they come in. So we can see this in here. If we click on this, again, this gets shown with the title, the excerpt, and under the link here, this should, if it's set up correctly, take us to the blog post, which it does, which is exactly what we wanted. And then again, as before, you have the option to approve or reject the approval that comes through. So we can do this straight from Teams, which is what I will do. So if I click approve, something went wrong. Of course it did. Let's have another look at that. Just refresh this page. I'm using the Teams browser version at the moment because Teams on my desktop seems to throw up all sorts of random errors. So let's try that again. And there we go. So we can see that the status is now set to approved, and we have a little notification that pops up saying that the final status is approved. So go back into here. We can see, again, if we go back into our activity feed and we click on the one that we just approved, we can see that it was approved by and who was requested by. Of course, it was me, and approved by me. So we can see who's responsible for bringing the content into the actual list for everyone else to see. The other way which you can do this is through a email. Now I'm going to load up just load up here. I'm going to load up my Outlook. Let me just drag that off a second, just so we can see if that has come through. Bear me a second. Let me just drag this out of the way. Okay, so this is the email that's just come through onto my admin or approvers email, if you like. And basically, obviously I've already accepted using Teams, but this would give you some kind of a dynamic email, if you like, which at the time of sending until it gets approved would say whether I need to approve it with exactly the same details. So this comes through on my email as well. So there's 3 ways out of the box that we can start and approve this approval process. So we've looked at the emails, we've looked at Teams, and we've looked at the Power Automate dashboard, approvals dashboard, should I say. So let me just close that. And if we go back to our SharePoint list, we can now see at the bottom that our approval process has actually worked, and we are showing as approved on our latest post. So there's one other thing that I wanted to cover. Hopefully that covers all of the basic approval workflow stuff that we're going to start with. I mean, we'll get more in depth as I kind of learn and progress, because I am still in that learning stage where I'm researching the week before and then moving on and kind of trying to put what I've learned into practice for my Friday sessions. So hopefully, as again I progress, I'll learn a few more different techniques, a few more different ways that you can approve. A way that I want to look at is adaptive cards, which I know that Collab 365 has some really good content on from their conferences. I can't remember who did the session, but I seem to remember there being some really good stuff at GlobalCon 2, which was surrounding approval process and adaptive cards. So eventually I will go and look into that. But the next thing that I wanted to quickly go through today before I conclude this session is what I struggled to do last week due to some strange Teams technical issues. But from my understanding, I am able to do that in Teams on the web browser. So if I go to Teams on the left, and we go to our team that we created, and we can see, as before, we have our posts, files, and wiki at the top of the screen. We need to add a tab that allows people to submit forms without having to go directly to the web to do so. So over in Teams, we will click on our Add a tab at the top left. And we can see that we are given a bunch of different connectors which we can bring into our Teams channel. And we're going to be using forms, seeing as that's the kind of primary option that we created last week. And connection was reset. Let me just do a quick refresh. And we'll try that again. Doesn't want to do anything. Let's give that a try. Okay, so there we go. It's working now. So we can create a form. We can create a form straight from Teams itself, if we wanted to do that. Maybe something we could look at further down the line. But for the purpose of this, we already have a form which we want to bring in. So we're going to click on the add an existing form, and we are going to use the submit your article to the Daily Digest, and again, it's not the test one. And then we can click save. And now we have a tab right in our Teams channel where we can submit articles to be approved. So yeah, that's going to conclude today's live stream. Eventually, we're going to be looking at bringing SharePoint list views into Microsoft Teams, so we can display the list of approved articles for non-admins, and displaying a kind of maybe a list of articles that need approving for the admins as well. So that's going to be something that we look into. As always, I'm going to be posting regular blogs, which I share over social media, and they'll be on the Collar 365 website, which eventually will be changing to our new community, which hopefully won't be too long until that happens. But for now, they are all available on the old community, which is collar365.community. And I'll probably be trying to post maybe 2 to 3 blog posts a week, sharing my progress, sharing what I'm going to be doing on the Friday session, and sharing my learning progress for some of the courses and learning materials that I'm currently embarking on as well. But yeah, until then, if you want to remember to join next Friday at 3 p.m. We'll be continuing the process of what we're building. I'm not sure what that's going to entail yet, but I'll be sharing that with you on Monday over social. So if you follow my profiles, my name's Connor DC. You'll see me around on our Power Automate, Power Apps groups, all of our Microsoft groups that we have on Facebook and on LinkedIn as well. But that's where I'll be sharing kind of what I'm going to be building and what's to kind of come up next. So that's me, and I will see you again next Friday.